Alright, in this video I want to take a look at creating some more digital looks. We're going to do that by blending some textures and some of our digital stylizations, so let's jump right in. To begin, I'm going to go ahead and add a gradient to the scene, that way we have something to manipulate. Again, typically you want to start with a texture so you have pixels rendering and then you can modify them from there. So I'm going to grab, let's say, we'll do a conic gradient. So a conic gradient is just like an angular gradient. It revolves around a point. We can maybe add a color stop to this, randomize the colors a little bit. I'm going to change our color space, and I'm going to come down here into the effect panel and just maybe repeat this twice so that we get this line all the way through the screen. If I repeated it multiple times, you get more of a pinwheel effect. I think what we're going for is just going to be a nice, just straight horizontal line. Let me tweak some of these colors. I do think I want sort of an orangey look maybe to this. Orangey red. Maybe if I drop this last color here down to a darker color. There you go. Now we have something that we can play with. That's kind of interesting. This will be a good starting point to work with our digital effects. Doesn't have to be perfect. So here we have this conic gradient in place. Now I'm going to go down here to our distortions category. We have a bunch of different distortions that would work well for this, but just to get something moving, let's pick the very first one, bar shift. It just sort of shifts things up and down in a bar-like approach. You can adjust the angle to get different sort of diagonal lines going here. I'm just going to sort of leave it like that. And I'm going to introduce some speed so that we have some motion, increase the intensity just a little bit, play with the seed. And now we have these sort of constantly moving bars of color, of texture. This works well with the conic gradient because our conic gradient comes to that hard line, and with the bars, you don't notice the hard line. It just feels like part of the effect, right? Let's jump in to see what we could do with this. And the very first one I'm going to look at is under stylization, and we'll start with object tracker. So what object tracker does is it tries to track part of your image and just draws these nice tracking frames around it, very digital-like look. In this case, we're detecting the brightness, and we can adjust the threshold here to determine how much we're going to detect and how much we're not. Maybe I want to come back into our gradient and just make the peak of our gradient clearly brighter than the rest. So I'll drop the rest down. And I'm using Asus Filmic, which seems like a good color space, but maybe we just start with this. This isn't bad. I could make it whiter, I don't really want that. Could also pump it in one particular direction or the other to create more contrast. Honestly, not hating this. A bit more saturation, and we're looking good. So this object tracker is, it's got its threshold that we've been setting just to determine how much we're tracking. We can also change, is it like a mosaic style? Is it a grid? Is it a quad tree? I'm going to try quad tree just to get a bit more detail. Maybe size down our grid a little bit. Allow for a bit more subdivision. And you can set the stroke and fill of the object tracker. So right now our fill is almost transparent, so you're just seeing that bounding box. I could just randomize the colors here, and now we're starting to see something that feels very different. What if, just for fun, we drop that to near black, and we give it just a white stroke? And now maybe instead of tracking the brightness, we'll track the dark areas. Ooh, that's interesting. I could bump that threshold up. Maybe I want to subdivide a little bit more, or decrease our base cell size, play with some of that gradient. That's an interesting effect. I'm going to come back here into Object Tracker and just play with the threshold. Maybe I want more, maybe I want less. Maybe we want to shift the angle here. Okay, now we're getting something that feels kind of like a digital space. These color shapes moving over the space, that's quite nice. You can play with the intensity, that's not going to do much here. Count. So that's an interesting effect. Now let's take this a few steps further with some more digital effects. We have keyframes. That's a fun one. It's sort of very similar to Object Tracker in the notion that we're trying to track certain parts of the image. In this case, it's tracking the bright sections. So it's trying to keep track of where these shapes are moving. We can increase the number of trackers. That might give us, obviously, a more dynamic, involved look with more trackers involved. We can bump up the variance, or even bring it down maybe, so it starts tracking other parts of this. I wonder if I move it below Object Tracker, if it will move with those shapes a little bit better. I don't know. A lot we could play with here. I'm just going to leave it like this for now. I am going to drop Object Tracker's threshold a little bit so we get some more shapes in here. And maybe just play with transparency to let some of this through. That's interesting. We're getting kind of wild with the way this looks. But you can start to see how we could build up a sort of digital effect from this. I am going to remove keyframes. It's, in my opinion, probably a little bit too much here. And there's plenty of other effects we could play with. We have data moshing, which feels like this sort of failure of the video frame rate. It's starting to bleed certain frames together. That works well, used sparingly. We have overlays that work across the entire frame, such as we could apply a glitch effect here. That feels kind of digital. We could apply a CRT screen, which feels like you're looking through a TV sort of style pixel screen at this. And of course, we can play with the colors. We can play with all of our settings to create these wild, digital, glitchy effects. This was obviously what we've been doing this for about 6 minutes now. 6 minutes of just playing with different components and a handful of these effects, and we've created something that feels kind of digital that we can have countless different variations of. If I duplicate this, I could come in here and just pick different color schemes, shift the bars at an angle, and we have an entirely different look. In fact, I may take this and just make this one of our presets available at shaders.com. So that has been some of the digital effects, some of the stylizations, and building a digital composition with shaders.